So I'm standing in front of Edmonton's first home-built aircraft. So this is a Cranwell CLA.4, and this was actually a British design plane. So it was designed for an amateur aircraft building trial in the UK. After the First World War, there was a surplus of aircraft, both in the UK and Canada, surplus war aircraft. And it actually kind of stifled the development of aircraft because there were so many aircraft around that companies didn't really feel like they needed to develop any more. So there was a few contests to spark development of aircraft design, and one of them was the Limpty trials in the UK. So the Cranwell was designed by an amateur group at RAF College Cranwell, which is hence its name, under the direction of Nicholas Copper. So the two Cranwells that were in the UK entered the trials. One of them was fitted with a smaller engine, the second with a larger, much more powerful engine. And unfortunately, the more powerful engine sucked in a fly at the start of the trials and disqualified them. The smaller engine was much too underpowered for the aircraft, so it didn't do very well in the trials. But there was a group in Edmonton that heard about these trials, and they heard actually good things about the Cranwell aircraft. So they sent away to the Cranwell group and asked to buy some plans. And they started building this aircraft in Alf Want's basement, who was a member of the club. And it went pretty well, but if you've never built an aircraft before, it's kind of a slow process. So they started in 1927, but fairly shortly after that, the club actually got some real aircraft. Well, some already built brand new certified aircraft, which is the de Havilland Cirrus Moth. So the club started flying the Cirrus Moth, and they kind of abandoned the Cranwell project. So Alf Want purchased the plans, the already started aircraft and the engines, and ended up working on it by himself. So he finished it, and unfortunately the aircraft was too large and it couldn't actually fit through his stairwell to get out of his basement. So he ended up having to knock a hole in the wall of his house to get the aircraft out. But he finished it, and it flew in the winter of 1931 to 1932. Initially it was fitted with a fairly small 3-cylinder engine, and then upgraded to a much larger 5-cylinder engine, which they needed because the altitude in Edmonton is significantly higher than in the UK. So unfortunately, the Cranwell crashed in 1933 off the intersection of 127th Street and 119th Avenue. And Alf Want carried all the remains back to his house, stored them in his attic, and said, one day I'm going to fix this aircraft. So in 1989, he brought the remains to the museum and started working on it again. And today, the Cranwell that is in the museum, one of only 3 ever made, is the last one left in the world. So the 2 that were in the UK, one crashed and was lost in the crash. The second was sold into private ownership and was scrapped in 1933. So this was not only the only one left, but the last one actually to fly. So what do you need if you want to build your own Cranwell? The answer is actually not very much. We've left the covering off this side of the aircraft so you can see the internal structure and see how these biplanes are actually constructed. So as you can see, they're made of wood, a wood frame of relatively small pieces of wood, small members. They're all joined together, and then they're braced with wires. So the wire truss system is kind of like if you think of the high-level bridge. So they form a truss, and they provide a lot of structural stability to that framework. The wings are similar. There's longitudinal pieces and attached to ribs. The ribs are what give the aerofoil shape to the wing. And of course, the whole thing is covered in fabric. So in most of these aircraft, it's a cotton or linen, and then it's painted with a doping material to waterproof it, keep the fabric stretched tight, and protect it. And so that fabric basically seals the whole aircraft and provides the aerodynamic lift. The Cranwell here has 2 seats, so a pilot could sit in the back and a passenger could sit in the front. And one of the strangest things about this design is that it is an inverted sesquiplane. So if you think of most biplanes, they either have 2 wings that are identical, or in the case of, say, the Curtiss Jenny, the upper wing is much larger than the lower wing. The Cranwell, on the other hand, has an upper wing that's much smaller than the lower wing. It's both shorter and not as thick. It's smaller chord. They pay a price for that in aerodynamics. It doesn't produce as much lift and makes it slightly more unstable. The benefit is that it makes it significantly easier for the pilot and passenger to get in and out of, especially in an emergency. So plans for the Cranwell aren't very available, but if you're interested in amateur aircraft construction, there's the Experimental Aircraft Association. And here at the museum, there's a dedicated group of volunteers that are continuing to build their own home-built aircraft today. So we hope you're enjoying these videos. If you do, feel free to like and share them, and let us know what you'd like to see.
The Alberta Aviation Museum has now reopened.
Get your advanced timed entry tickets to visit the museum Thursdays through Sundays at albertaaviationmuseum.com.
Discover the wondrous stories of Blatchford Field all summer long at the Alberta Aviation Museum,
where history takes flight.